what I discovered this morning under the car shocks me to my core, that a professional outfitters can actually do this to a vehicle that they know is going to be traveling extensively off the beaten track, far away from normal civilization. So this morning started exactly like every overlander wishes no mornings would ever start. We have a major electronic problem with the vehicle, and I've spent the morning on my back under the bonnet trying to work in sand with not enough tools, and it's just hugely frustrating. Yes, as overlanders we do accept that there is a lot that we have to learn mechanically about our vehicles. A lot can go wrong while you're on the road for long periods of time, but the one thing you do not expect, and you shouldn't have to expect, is shoddy workmanship by, you know, supposedly reputable companies. Having a bit of a difficult morning. Our second battery hasn't been charging. I'm not sure why. I'm not a genius with electronics. So our fridge is about to turn off, and it's full of meat, which would be devastating. It's just a complete waste, and you know, financially it costs a lot of money. I'm also unable to work off my battery at the moment because the inverter's not working. So yeah, having a bit of a morning of it. I might have to just distribute the meat amongst all the staff here, and don't know. I really don't know what to do. I'm getting pretty frustrated. I'm not keeping up with my editing. Yeah, it's difficult to try and live off the road like this, and we're trying to do something pretty unique, and it comes with its challenges, and this is one of them. Been a tough morning so far. Hopefully I can sort it out. This fuse has blown in the past. We actually had to drive from the Okavango back to Maun and spend 2 days there because of issues I've had with this connection in the past. But as little as I know about electronics, I'm just going to turn the car off, try and just clean up the terminals, reconnect it, maybe put another fuse because I do have spares now, and see, maybe that does the trick, maybe that solves the problem. I don't know. Let's try a bit of a bush fix, see if we can sort this out. Okay, so I got it open and this fuse is absolutely fried. I'm going to replace it. I do have a bunch of spares. It shouldn't just be frying like that, but that might temporarily solve the issue, and we can at least get the fridge running again. I do have a fire extinguisher on standby. I need to learn more about electronics. I need to learn more about electronics. This is dangerous. I've tried a couple of different fixes to see if I can get it working. I replaced a couple of fuses. The meat in the fridge is defrosting, which is a huge waste. A front runner Kyalami installed it for me originally. We've had issues with this fridge before. The fuse was incorrectly installed when it was originally done. I have messages from a former front runner employee confirming that they put the incorrect fuse in. That time it cost us 3 days because we had to drive back from the middle of the Okavango to Maun to get new fuses. And we left it behind. We kind of accepted it as, you know, one of the risks of overlanding. You're doing a lot of modifications to a vehicle. There's a chance that there'll be mistakes made. It's not acceptable, but we let it be. Then a couple of months later, during lockdown, I was busy working on my spare wheel. I actually lowered the spare wheel, and I realized that the additional fuel tank that sits above the spare wheel in the traditional mounting point for the spare wheel, the fuel tank was loose. So I investigated it a little bit further, and I found out that the fuel tank had been secured to the chassis without using lock nuts, which is what it's meant to use. You're meant to use lock nuts so that it doesn't come off when it's shaking and rattling and everything. So our additional fuel tank was actually secured to the car for about 6,000 kilometers only because the spare wheel was pulled up underneath it. My long-range fuel tank was incorrectly installed by Frontrunner in Johannesburg. They used these. There's no lock nuts in there at all. So all 3 bolts had come off my long-range fuel tank, meaning that the only thing holding it on was actually my spare wheel. So you can see up there where the bolts are meant to be in. Really, really bad of them. And this is not the first thing that Frontrunner have really f***ed up on my vehicle. I must be completely honest. I spent a lot of money there. The consequences of this negligent workmanship are pretty serious. If I didn't have my spare wheel in, for whatever reason, if I'd mounted it on the roof or if I'd put it on the back door like my plan is actually to do, that diesel tank would have fallen off while I was driving. And obviously fuel and sparks and shit is not a good idea. This is, it's another really bad one on Frontrunner's behalf. I mean, that's hugely dangerous. You have a fuel tank coming off. Not only, you know, the very obvious, it's a tank of fuel coming off at speed on a road, but also it's attached to the vehicle via fuel lines. So it's going to be bouncing around under the back wheels. I don't know why I let that one go. I really shouldn't have. But the final straw now, when we were in Johannesburg this last time, we got Frontrunner Kyalami to install rock sliders for us, which you'd think is a relatively straightforward process. I was actually considering doing it myself because I enjoy making the DIY videos, but what I discovered this morning under the car shocks me to my core, that a professional outfitters can actually do this to a vehicle that they know is going to be traveling extensively off the beaten track, far away from normal civilization, and under pretty strenuous circumstances. You know, we haven't built this vehicle like this so that we can drive around city streets. We built this vehicle like this so that we can tell conservation stories in the most remote parts of Africa. It's built hard so that it can work hard. What they've done, the bracket that goes around the bottom of the chassis that connects to the rock slider, because the whole idea of a rock slider is that it connects directly to the chassis, and if you hit something hard there, such as a rock, it doesn't bend the bodywork, it hits the chassis, the strongest point in the car, so you get the least chance of doing damage. What they've done is the bracket that's meant to go around the chassis, they haven't just put it around the chassis, they put it around the chassis and the electronic cables that are going from the battery to the back of the car to charge the second battery. So effectively what's happened is you have the chassis, you have a cable, an electrical cable that's got a lot of power going through it, and then a bracket around it that's then bolted down as tight as possible over that cable onto the chassis. So you're taking a cable that's got a huge amount of power going through it, and you're squeezing it as hard as you can between 2 metal objects, and then you're taking that off-road. And so every single time the vehicle moves, every single time the chassis and the rock sliders move slightly differently, it's doing this. That has created a short underneath the vehicle. So you have this huge amount of electricity going through that cable to the back of the car. They've shorted it out under the chassis right next to the fuel tank. This is the sort of thing that happens when you hear horror stories about overlanding cars that go up in smoke in a minute. So I am absolutely livid. I'm furious about this. I suspect that Frontrunner will probably try and take legal action against me, but how can you sue for defamation if I'm telling the truth? This is 100% factual. They have done this installation. They have put a bracket over an electric cable. Last time they installed an incorrect fuse. Last time they didn't use the correct nuts on the additional fuel tank. They have now stranded us twice and endangered our life twice. And that's just unacceptable. And I spent $10,000, over 10,000 US dollars at Frontrunner. It's about 190,000 Rand, give or take. And that was just on the first 2 installations. So some of the additional work that's been done since then has cost me more than that. And I will never go there again. I strongly recommend. After 2 days of seriously struggling, I found a construction crew working on the lodge next door with the tools I needed to make a temporary fix. There was permanent damage done to the second battery, but we were able to continue. We get back to the fun stuff next week, I promise.